Hello, folks! We got another countdown with real fishing for you today. We're going to talk about my top 10 lures for pike. Pike are one of the easiest fish to catch, probably. Any lure in a tackle shop will catch pike on any retrieve. They're aggressive. They will eat anything. So, this is a bit of a hard list to make because the category of pike lures is so broad. So what I've narrowed it down to is the lures that I get numbers of pike on, the lures I get big pike on, and the ones that are specifically targeted for pike. So I get a lot of pike when I'm crappie fishing with those little crappie jiggers. Remember my top 10, my top 5 crappie lures, I talked about the jigs, and I get a lot of pike on those. But that's not a lure that's going to make this countdown because it's not designed to target pike. So, without further ado, let's begin. So my number 10 pike lure is a rattle bait. This is a rattle and wrap here in Fire Tiger. Rattle baits are long casting. As the name suggests, they make a lot of noise. They also sink, so these are my go-to for vertical jigging. You know, sometimes in the summer you'll get giant pike in like 80, 90, 100 feet of water, and that's when you want to use a rattle and wrap or any other lipless crankbait. They produce really well. They get numbers. I've caught probably more pike on rattle and wraps and other lipless rattlers than any other lure. But I don't get too many giants. However, I did catch my biggest pike on one of these. It was a huge one for Southern Ontario. It was 48 inches. So that's a 20-pound pike. That's a monster here in Southern Ontario. So that's my number 10 right there, is a rattle bait. My number 9 is a topwater stick bait. This is a Head and Super Spook in the frog color. Stick baits are good for aggressive pike. So in springtime, fall, I wouldn't use them in summer because the pike get kind of sluggish in the summertime and they kind of hunker deep. That's when you move more towards your jerk baits and your rattlers. And these generally work best at the beginning and at the end of the day. But they are a big profile in the water. They're long. And they look like a shad or a frog that's trying to escape the fish. And a lot of people will just kind of straight walk them across the surface. But I like to walk them and then pause. And when you do that, when you pause the lure, the pike thinks it's injured and it strikes. Remember though, with topwaters, don't set the hook right away. Wait a minute before you set the hook. Number 8 is a bucktail spinner. This is a classic pike lure. This is a Mepps Agilia. I forgot the color. And this is the tandem Agilia. It's got 2 hooks and that big old bucktail on there. These catch giant pike. It's been proven. These have been around for so long. But I'm in Southern Ontario, where these don't work as well. But if you're in Northern Ontario or Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Northwest Territories, this will probably be much closer to number 1. These put off a lot of vibration in the water, and the profile isn't super realistic, but the vibration really makes up for it. And pike just reaction hit these. These are my search lures for pike, and these are my lures if I'm targeting monster pike. I don't get as many numbers on bucktails, but I definitely get size on them. My number 7 is a crankbait. This is a Storm Smash Shad, and I think it's Sexy Shad. I like flat-sided crankbaits better than round ones because they have a more realistic wobble. And you'll get pike in spring and fall on these, but you also get those summer pike on these when they get sluggish. But I like crankbaits in summer. That's when they really shine. Because you can get crankbaits down really deep. And that's where pike are in summer. And if you get these kind of shad-style crankbaits with the tight wobble, they just can't resist that because it's a natural presentation to them when they're being more sluggish. Crankbaits I found work best when trolled. They're not my choice lure for casting. And a lot of people use like giant 8, 9, and 10-inch crankbaits. But this regular size smash shad has worked really well for me. And I've got huge pike on this thing. I've caught like a few pike plus 40 inches on just a regular sized shad imitating crankbait. So, and even in lakes with no shad, like on the Canadian Shield lakes, I'll still get on this. My number 6 is really one that most people don't expect. That's a swim bait, a soft plastic swim bait. This is a Trigger X slop hopper. I use this for bass. This is probably my number 1 for largemouth bass. And I fish them in the weeds in the courses, like Balsam Lake. There's no pike in the tri-lakes, but they're in Balsam. And I get bass on this as I'm targeting, but I also get a lot of pike. And I started using it for pike in my traditional pike spots, like Lake Ontario. And that's when I started nailing them on this. I just rigged this thing on a jig head, anywhere between a 1/2 ounce and a 1 ounce jig head. And sometimes I put a stinger hook if they're striking short. And swim baits are a natural presentation. They imitate a lot of the smelt and the whitefish that we have in our waters. And most pike haven't seen these. And the action on them is natural. That boot tail kind of just gives it that really subtle swimming action. And the pike just inhale these. And they eat it like a fish. They don't come up to it and just smash it like other lures. No, they'll hit it across and kind of swim off with it, and they hang on to these things. With all the other lures on my list, except the topwaters, you have to set the hook right away, or that fish is going to let go. With a swim bait, you can wait a little bit. In fact, it's better to wait a little bit, just let them run off with it. Just you better have a wire leader, or you're having a bad day. Usually, I don't fish wire leaders for pike because I'm good at fighting fish, but I always use them for swim baits because they tend to swallow these things. My number 5 is a jerk bait. This is a Rapala X-Rap in the river perch color. This is an X-Rap 10. Jerk baits work really well in summer. Those pike, they've moved a little deeper. They're not as active. So you come over them and you can add a split shot, or maybe if the pike are in maybe 10-15 feet of water, you don't need a split shot, but you add 1 or 2 split shots if they're a little deeper. And just twitch a jerk bait. They'll smash it. These are like one of the classics. A lot of people use live suckers and these. If you talk to any old-time pike angler, live suckers, these bucktails, that's all they used because that's what works. And these produce numbers. I've caught tons of pike on these, and they produce size. I've got some X-Raps that are completely beat up. I've also got Husky Jerks and Suics. Those are some other really good jerk baits. These would be higher if they worked better in spring and in fall. My number 4 is going to be a spinnerbait. And this is a 1.5 ounce musky spinnerbait. And the reason I like spinnerbaits is because they get a reaction from the fish. They see this big profile skirt, these big blades, and just putting off a lot of thump and vibration in the water. And they can't stand that. They inhale these. Spring, summer, fall. You can cast these deep, on those deep ledges. And they'll just inhale these. You can fish them really shallow up in weed beds. They're weedless. You can tip them with a grub. You can tip them with a live sucker. And they'll still catch fish. These will catch you fish anytime, anywhere. They're really one of the staples in my tackle box, along with these other 3. So these are like one of the pike lures that you need to have as a spinnerbait. My number 3 is a buzzbait. And I love topwater fishing. I just love seeing the fish come up and blow up on these things. That's one of my favorite sights in fishing. And buzzbaits put off a lot of vibration and splash on the surface. Like, if you look at this buzzbait, it's pretty beat up. It's missing an eye, the skirt's missing strands, the blades are all scratched up. This thing caught a lot of pike. You know, I had this just big-time pike fishing at the end of December this year, and I caught a ton of them, and this was the hot lure then. And they were really busting up on smelts on the surface at that time. I like the buzzbaits with the two blades, or buzzbait with a clacker, something that's going to make a lot more noise. The two blades is better, it has a lot more profile. But if you can't find those, find them with a clacker. This is a Strike King KVD buzzbait. And these do work best on calm days, but I've caught fish on buzzbaits on windy days too. The reason this isn't number one is because calm days is best, and you can't really fish these guys on windy days. But the casting too. Casting range is not very good with buzzbaits because these blades, they're wind resistant. I have these on my fishing rods, and I'll walk, and I'll just be walking down the street, and then you just hear like as the blades twirling because they catch the wind. I've had them actually fly back and hit me in the face when it's windy. Not fun. Number 2 is a minnow plug. Now, a lot of people have a hard time telling the difference between a minnow plug and a jerkbait. The difference between a minnow plug and a jerkbait is a jerkbait, you have to twitch it to get action out of it. It has no swimming action. A minnow plug has a bill on it that allows it to swim, so it has this real nice wobble. So you can fish these any time of year. You can burn them real fast on the surface in spring or fall. When the pike are active, you can twitch them deep. In summer, you could just kind of slow roll them and get a nice wobble. But my favorite way to fish them is I cast, make a real long cast, and then I just twitch it under and just let it float. And they will almost always hit it when you're letting it float back up because it makes it look injured, like it's dying. And they inhale these things. Usually I get all 3 trebles. This is a bomber long A. And I've caught a lot of pike on bombers. I get them on original Rapalas too. But it's the bomber and the original Rapala. Those are the 2 that always seem to work. So, now it's time. What is my number 1 pike lure? My number 1 pike lure is a spoon. This is a Daredevil. Now, what I've done to the Daredevil, if you look at the spoon, you can tell it's caught fish. It's got, only half the paint's gone. Is I've changed the hook out. I've changed out to a single hook. And what this allows me to do is allows me to put a soft plastic grub. This is a trick I learned from Thunder Mist Lures. And they actually make a spoon like this. It's called a Python darter. So you get the wobble and flash of the spoon, but then you get the action of the grub. So you get a natural presentation and you get an aggressive presentation. So if they're not really biting that day, then the grub will get them. If they are biting, a spoon will get them. And that's why I like a spoon. I can use it any time of year. It's really versatile. It catches numbers of fish. It catches size. I've caught giants on this thing. But I've also caught tons, hundreds of pike. Like, look at this spoon. It's all beat up, and I've had this one for a long time, so it's a little rusted. If you see the split ring that's all bent out, I need to change that split ring. And I've changed it to a 3/0 owner hook. But, they love spoons. They nail them. They love the 2 actions and the 1 lure. They see it as a struggling bait fish, and they hit it. So, that was my top 10 lures for pike and muskie. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. See you next time.